And we're joined now by Peter Kirkham, who's a former senior investigating officer at the Metropolitan Police. Good evening to you.
Evening.
Is this particularly rare that 4 men have been killed in one single night?
It's unusual for 4 to die. Sadly, it's anything but unusual for a number of stabbings to happen on the same night. That is now absolutely typical of a Friday and Saturday night across London. I hate to think what the death toll would be if it weren't for the great skills of the ambulance service, the helicopter medics and the A&E departments. It is horrendous out there.
Do you think there's a reason that such horrific events like this are happening?
Yeah, the reason is very obvious. Theresa May has cut the police service so that there are no longer police officers on the street and the control of public space has been lost. This is just one symptom of that. There are numerous others. Deaths on the road are rising because road traffic police are going. Shoplifting's going through the roof because there are no police officers to deal with that. Antisocial behaviour is getting out of control again because there are no neighbourhood officers. The moped crime epidemic, there are no officers out there, and those that are out there aren't allowed to pursue. It is very simple. It is entirely down to Theresa May and her cuts to the police. She has the blood of these young people on her hands.
I suppose her argument would be that the role of policing has changed a lot in recent years because now there is the ongoing threat of extremism and terrorism. And of course that was something that she looked into for the New Year celebrations because it was heightened, wasn't it?
Theresa May has been Home Secretary and then Prime Minister for the last nearly 8 years now. She is entirely responsible for this state of affairs. She has refused consistently to listen to professional police officers that have told her that crime and the demands on policing have changed. They haven't gone away. They have changed. Last night, we saw, I'm told, 3,000 armed officers drawn into central London to police the New Year's Eve celebrations. Those officers haven't come from somewhere else. They have come from elsewhere in London. They are not a magic box full of officers just brought out for the night. That means there are fewer officers elsewhere. It is no surprise to me to hear that stabbings took place in the suburbs and not in the centre of London where all the police officers were drawn to last night. There are too few police officers to keep the public safe. She has been told that repeatedly and she is ignoring it. It is criminal. Knife
crime seems to be going up. Is there something that can be done to try and tackle it?
Loads of things need to be done simultaneously. Cressida Dick, in an interview during the week, said that if she had more resources, she'd put them onto other aspects of dealing with knife crime. Stop and search and police patrols and presence in public places, that is what keeps people safe at the pointed end. But officers need to be in schools. Officers need to be working with youth groups. Officers need to be working with community groups. Officers need to be working with probation service to try and deal with offenders and stop them re-offending. There are 1,000 things that need to be done. You can't do them without officers. And no matter how much this government goes on and on about being more, making more use of technology, an iPad is not going to prevent a single stabbing. It is as simple as that.
And we've seen in recent years some very sad but very high-profile cases. Ben Kinsella, his sister, Brooke Kinsella, who was in EastEnders, raised a lot of awareness about it, and she still continues to do so. Has that helped raise awareness about the problem, would you say, and try to kind of cut the number of knife crimes that there are?
Nothing seems to be raising the awareness of this government. They just seem to be ignoring everything. I really don't understand why they are not treating this as the emergency that it is. It is a public disaster happening in slow motion in front of our eyes. If these young people were white and they were on the streets of Maidenhead in her constituency and in Windsor, there would be an utter uproar. It would not be ignored. This is institutional racism at the heart of government. It is as simple as that.
So is it particular areas that are most affected, I presume, is it?
It's inner cities. It's not just a London thing. There were 5 people stabbed in Sheffield last night, for instance. There were stabbings all around the country, just like there are every Friday and Saturday night. This is an inner city problem. It goes with inner city crime. And unfortunately, the demographics of inner cities are not white and well-off. They are poor and black and minority ethnic. There is institutional racism at the heart of this government, and that, I think, is the source of the problem.
OK, well, thank you very much for your thoughts. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Now the Environment Secretary, Michael.
So why is the head of the Met Police looking to Scotland's second city for ways to tackle knife crime? Well, between 2006 and 2011, 15 people under 19 were stabbed to death in Glasgow. Since 2012, there have been none. And over a 10-year period, the number of people found carrying a knife or blade in Scotland fell by 69%. Well, here to discuss the issue is former Met Chief Inspector Peter Kirkham. Peter, Thank you for coming in to talk to me about this. I mean, you just saw Ria's report there. You just heard those statistics. What is Glasgow getting so right and we are getting so wrong?
The whole point of the treating it as a public health issue is that you look for the causes and don't just treat the symptoms. Policing can only treat the symptoms.
Okay.
Policing is what's going to happen if somebody carries a knife, decides to carry a knife out on the street. Then policing's the sort of last opportunity to stop them using it. And that needs to be there. People seem to be thinking that the public health approach is not policing. It isn't. Policing is an integral part of that. They did more policing and more stop search at the beginning to show that the stick was there as well as the carrot. But it gets into the reasons why people decide to carry the knife in the first place, which police really can't do. OK, so what, I mean, we saw there in Ria's report this inclusive approach, that it is something you can't simply police your way out of. How do we build those bridges, though, between police officers that here in London and the young people who are carrying knives on a daily basis and unfortunately committing these crimes and killing each other? They simply won't listen to the police. Kids don't listen to the police full stop about anything.
But why is that? How can we work on that? What can we do?
It's not that. What we need is other people that do have influence with young people. So youth leaders, teachers, community groups, mentoring, you heard mentioned there. There's a whole range of interventions by other people apart from police officers that need to be taking that message. And unfortunately, that isn't necessarily there all the time. There's some really good people operating in those spheres, but it's capacity. And the second big point is this doesn't happen for nothing. Amber Rudd recently has said, oh, well, this can all be done out of existing budgets. No, it can't. You're saying it's a budgetary issue, saying it's a resourcing issue? There is money needed, not massive amounts, not the sorts of money they spend on bribing the DUP to support them and other things, but they need significant additional money. And most importantly, they need leadership from the government. Within London, the mayor is trying to get something off the ground, and within London, that's great. But it's bigger than London, especially with the county lines drug issues, taking London problems out into the home counties and further. But, I mean, recently there was stabbings in Horsham. There's stabbings in Sleepy Little Village in Hertfordshire. This is not just a London problem, so it needs government lead.
All right. Well, Peter Kirkham, thank you so much for coming in to talk to me about this today. Thank you. Well, this week our focus has been on knife crime after 3 fatal stabbings in the capital since the weekend. And while Cresta Dick was in Glasgow today looking for answers, her officers back here reveal they now believe 2 of the attacks in Camden are linked. Well, from there, Lorna Shaddick has the latest.
Well, we were down at the border on Friday with the vice president. There was a lot of people from the media down there following him because he was talking about border security. We're going to talk about that coming up. But we asked him the question about Joy Behar, because that was an issue you all really cared about and wrote us at the end of the week last week. Joy Behar said because he prays to God and because God speaks to him, like he does many of you, that Joy Behar said he had a mental illness because God speaks to him and he hears from God. So we asked him what he thought about that. Listen. Joy Behar made a comment saying that leads her to believe that you have mental problems because God speaks to you. Is it hypocrisy that liberals, Democrats, mainstream media, they preach tolerance, but yet when someone wants to be a Christian and says that God speaks to them, they have a problem with that?
Those of us in public life are pretty accustomed to criticism. But when I heard that ABC had a program that likened my Christianity to mental illness, I just couldn't be silent. My Christian faith is probably the most important thing in my life. I do try and start every day reading the Bible. My wife and I try and have a prayer together before I leave the house every morning. But I do think I'm a very typical American. I think people of all different faith traditions cherish their faith in God, and to have ABC have a forum that spoke in such meaning terms, I think it's evidence of how out of touch some in the mainstream media are with the faith and values of the American people.
He went on to say, he just said, you know, and when you're in public life, which y'all know this, y'all been working on this show for 20 years, people say things. They say things, they criticize constantly. He said you get used to that. But when someone's criticizing God and your faith, that is so important to the people that he represents, to most Americans, to most people around the world, no matter what your faith is, no matter what your belief is, then he has to stand up and he has to say something.
I think it's unbelievable that Oprah, that almost the next day said, well, I was going to run for president, but I thought if God wanted me to, he would have said something. Really? So is Oprah Winfrey also mentally ill?
Right. Joy Behar later said she was just kidding.
No, but she said, well, but I give money to the church, which is the most ridiculous comeback ever. Oh.